Welcome to Sometimes There's Side Eye, a podcast about two friends having real and unfiltered conversations about dogs and people. Listen as we talk about our lives with dogs, training, behavior, share some laughs, and a whole lot of banter. I'm Heather.
And I'm Christy. So, on this episode, we are going to talk about grief, and we have a special guest with us, Jen Pereira. Jen is an amazing human being who has education that includes her PhD in counseling, education, and supervision from University of Florida. She is a licensed professional counselor supervisor with 24 years of experience working in the field as a counselor. She works as a clinical associate professor at ASU in counseling and counseling psychology and services as a training director for the master's program. She's also a two-time Ironman finisher. So,
Woo!
I mean, she has all the accolades.
Thanks for adding that piece.
Yeah. Welcome, Jen.
Welcome. We're so thrilled to have you. You're so fancy.
I'm so glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. And Jen, we like to usually start with our guests. What pets do you live with? And maybe tell us something that you like about each of them.
Yes. So right now we have Finley. Finley is a 16-and-a-half-year-old cat. I have had Finn since, oh my gosh, I probably got her when she was 5 weeks old. And she's sort of our resident old lady. And, the other thing that my husband calls her super spy, because even though she's old, she's still very agile. And so one of the things that happens is you'll be sitting somewhere or just like sort of doing laundry or looking around the room. And then all of a sudden she just appears and you have no idea where she came from. And then you turn around and she's gone again. So we refer to her as the super spy. And then we have Nash, who is our 2.5-year-old. I still call him the kitten, but he's like 17 pounds now. He's part Maine Coon. He's in the room right now making a racket. Yeah, so he's 2.5 and he loves his sister. But right now we're working on gentle hugs instead of rough hugs. So we're really working hard on the gentle hug theory. So he's not buying into it yet. So there's a lot of tackling and crying and all of that going on. But he is just absolutely hilarious and kind and snuggly. And he loves to do face smushies. So he comes up and he just presses his little fuzzy face against you. And it's the sweetest thing. But yeah, they're neat little kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want a face smushy from Nash.
Well, come on over. He'll give you one.
That sounds amazing.
We're heading over, Jen.
Yeah. It sounds like everyone needs that during a grief episode. I mean, I feel like that's perfect.
Yeah, he's a great face smusher.
We are going to issue a tissue warning here because we are going to talk about grief. So I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to tear up at some point during this episode. So we just want to issue that right at the beginning. So, and then also,
Christy, we've cried in many episodes in 2023. So let's just like start the beginning of 2024, just off with a bang.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought me in for a rough one.
Yeah. Welcome, Jen. Next time we'll do joy.
Yeah. Can we plan Jen back right off the bat with something happy?
And one of the reasons that I think we wanted to do grief is clearly because I lost Lucy, and that's when you do your own podcast, you get to choose your own subjects. And that's a subject that I'm going through. So I thought was appropriate. And then also Heather and I both had several people lose pets this year, kind of one right after another in an alarming amount. So we thought it was good to maybe just go through how grief is a little different with pets. And Jen, when I lost Lucy, Jen came over to visit and actually brought a plant that Nash had attacked. I loved it. I love it. It's still alive, by the way.
Nothing escapes.
And Jen had mentioned that she was doing some work with a nonprofit, a rescue group in Phoenix area for grief specifically. And so I thought, we got to have Jen on. Jen, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work you're doing with the rescue already.
Yeah, sure. It started because I needed a change of pace. I needed to use my brain a little bit differently. I was doing a lot of counseling training and counseling work and supervision, all those pieces. And I love these two guys that we've got at home here. And after we lost our older cat, about 3 years ago now, I just felt like I wanted to do something more. I wanted to see kittens and hold puppies and all that stuff. So I went over to one of our local shelters, and after a couple of months there, they realized that I'm also a mental health counselor and that one of my special areas is grief and loss. So we really just started talking about how hard it is for the people working in the shelter and the grief and all the concerns that they had and the stress. And then certainly they were getting a lot of pet surrenders. People were coming in, and I would periodically see people in the lobby crying, and I would sit down with them for a few minutes. And so we really started this idea of just doing a sort of a grief drop-in group.
Oh,
Doing pet bereavement. So we scheduled about 6 groups. It didn't go as well as I would have hoped. I mean, I was all ready and all prepared, and I absolutely love to work with grief, which I know seems like a strange thing to say, but we tried doing it in person first for several weeks. And I think that was just really hard.
yeah.
And, we had a couple of wonderful people show up and share some really lovely stories about their pets and really some in-depth grief issues that they were trying to manage. And so it was nice to be able to do those things. I think heading into the new year, we might take a look at doing some of that on Zoom. Because I think it's just easier for people to not have to pack up their grief sometimes and take it to a new location and meet a bunch of new people. It's just easier to be in your living room and do things on Zoom now that we're all kind of acclimated, to online presence. So so I wish that it was a neat learning experience for sure, sort of partnering with the shelter, and they were wonderful. So I think in the new year when we'll try it again and just try it in some different formats.
Sometimes a really good idea is still a really good idea. You just have to tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
I definitely can understand. Like, I love how you said packing up your grief and kind of taking it on the road, so to speak. Sometimes that can just be more than you can handle, but you still need the support somewhere. So I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As you've been going through this, do you find, because you've worked with grief for years, do you find that the grief process when losing a pet is similar to other griefs and loss, or is there some unique things that you found along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say yes and no. So yes, I think in that grief, when we're grieving pets or we're kind of lost in a process of bereavement, if you want to say it that way, I think that the grief over a pet can be just as deep and long lasting and really just as hard to sit with as the loss of a person, depending, of course, on who that person was and what the relationship was. But yes, I think certainly it can be just as deep and just as painful and hard to go through. And then no, in that I think that the one really big distinction when we're talking about pet loss and pet grief is that it's, in my field, it's what we call disenfranchised grief. So it's a loss that really isn't recognized by the larger world. And I think that's where the no comes in. So yes, it's quite similar. And yet people often don't see pet loss as an actual important loss, as something that could really deeply impact the very heart of someone and really disrupt their life and their happiness and bring on all kinds of mental health symptoms. We minimize, I guess, is what I would say. And so, I think it's similar, but we're not really given the same opportunities to have it be okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I lost my mom at a young age, and heart attack, here and gone. So traumatic loss. And then we also lost 5 pets in 3 years. And I absolutely, people rallied around me for the loss of my mom in every way. And I'm so grateful. And there were some key people in my life that rallied around for the loss of each dog, but it wasn't respected in the same way, for example, in a professional atmosphere. And so that can be really difficult. And some of those losses were harder than others based on circumstances, how long we owned the dog, all of those different factors. And some of them were really, really difficult. And I needed space in a professional way. And that was not necessarily something that was an option for me. So I do agree with everything you said completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Heather, it's not even that it's just the loss itself, which is hard enough. It's the fact that you can't grieve openly, right? When it's people, we can sort of wander through the world and we can grieve in open ways and grieve in the ways that we need to grieve. But when it's a pet, people just do not have the same patience and compassion for us in those moments. And I just find that really startling. I'm always surprised by that.
Yeah. I know after I lost Lucy, my manager's like, your numbers went down. What happened here? And I go, well, I mean, my dog died.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. How are you doing?
Wow.
Well, clearly not well. Like,
Yeah.
And that's a person who has dogs.
yeah. He was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're going through it. Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Like, it
I
was
have
so
a
dismissive.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I have
like,
n-
why are you okay? Why are you not performing at 100%?
so is that an empathy problem overall, Jen? Or what
What the hell is it?
yeah,
Or is it like a cultural thing?
right. What is it? That's so oh gosh. I feel for you,
Gosh.
Christy. That's terrible.
I think if you think about, here's part of the way I think about it. If we think about loss in general with people, right? I think people are uncomfortable with death. They're uncomfortable with grief. They're uncomfortable with strong emotions, particularly negative emotions. So if somebody starts to cry, most people back away and look around to see who's going to intervene. And
That's
so
so
I
true.
think, right? And so I think that there are graduations, there are stages or steps maybe of the importance of a loss, right? And if you think even in the wider world, one of the things that I talk with my students about is that even in the corporate world, we get, I think it's now 3.6 days to grieve a close loss, spouse, child. 3.6 days. That's the acceptable amount of
That's
loss.
clearly enough time.
Oh yeah, for
Of
sure.
course. Yeah. I mean, if you can't get over it in that amount of time, I don't know what's wrong with you, but
clearly you're broken.
yeah. So I think even if we think about how we grieve and allow people to grieve people, I think it's really understandable that in some sense that people just cannot process the importance of the life of a pet, particularly when they don't have pets. But I don't know, Heather. I don't know if it's an empathy problem as much maybe as it is an insight and awareness, into the fact that there are other people living their lives outside you, kind of thing. I mean, I don't mean that in a snarky way, but I think that we forget that other people are struggling and we need to show up in different ways. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that.
I will say that after my mom passed away, I was literally, I don't give a shit where I am. I don't care. If I cry, I cry. It did open that door in a way for me to just be like, here I am in my grief. And if you're going to say something about it, fuck you. I just didn't, but it was such a intense loss. So I think that sort of threw me into that comfortability. So I guess maybe experiences too for people are an influence in how they kind of deal or how they're capable of handling different people's losses. But I really find it very, very interesting how differently we treat it. And when I lose Tiago, my current heart dog, just put me in a padded room. If you think I'm coming to work the next week, it's not going to happen. I just can't. Yeah. I'm in therapy to prepare for his loss. True.
Well,
Heather,
I mean, quite honestly,
it's
we should all be in
it's
therapy.
I mean, it's true.
I am a
That
big
is true.
proponent of therapy, but like Heather, he's not old and he's not dying yet.
I think that's one of the hard things, is thinking about, if you think about it this way, when we're children, that's when we first experience loss, right? And often for kids, a pet is our first loss, but we don't teach kids how to grieve because we weren't taught how to do it well, right? And so we do things like we want them to suck it up. We want them to not cry all the time. We think they should be over it soon. Or my God, we replace the pet, which, if we end up talking about kids today, definitely want to talk about that.
I never even thought about that. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. Happens. I see it all the time. And it really,
Yeah.
so we don't teach kids to grieve. And then when we grow up as those kids into adults who then lose a pet or have a friend who loses a pet, we can't show up in that space because we don't know what to do. And that's why I think conversations like this are so important,
Yeah. And I agree with you. Being uncomfortable with strong emotions. I'm just self-aware that I am very uncomfortable with emotions for myself.
And
Not
yet
like,
you have cried on this podcast how many times
yeah,
at this
because I'm
point?
not face to face with people, but people were
Oh.
legitimately concerned when they came to visit me. And I was like, I'm fine. Okay. Thanks for coming. Oh, let's have like a laugh and enjoy each other. And then like people were leaving and did she cry with you? She didn't cry with me. Like she seemed fine. Is she okay? And I don't like the emotion face to face. And I even went to an event shortly after Lucy had passed away and someone said, "How are you?" And I said, "As long as nobody is nice to me, we're going to be fine. So nobody be nice to me and we're okay." And they were like, "Oh, okay." So we'll just pretend it's not happening. I was like, yeah, that's what I need right now. So I don't break down and cry at this meeting, But I do think that's interesting that we learned that as kids. Yeah. And maybe we can go into that now with
Yeah,
kids and
I
like
want to hear
how,
about this replacing of the
yeah,
pets and the whole thing. I don't have children, so not something
yeah.
I have to handle in my life, but I want to hear all the things.
Yeah, because even my mom with my last dog, when she passed away and I got Lucy, my mom was like, "Dude, Lizzie's grave isn't even cold, and she got another dog." And my dad's response was, "It's not going to bring Lizzie back. So however she needs to deal with it, that's how she's going to deal with it." And she's like, and he said, "For you, you need that space, but maybe for Christy, she needs that routine of having another dog in her life. But yeah, it was an interesting take on what was appropriate and when was appropriate.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think replacement is something that, I really think with all this stuff, our hearts are in the right place.
Sure.
Right. I think we try to do and say the things that are going to bring people comfort. But I would say when it comes to grief and loss, I think what happens for a lot of people is that they're really also working to comfort themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how can I get into this conversation, support this person, and get the hell out as quickly as possible because this is so uncomfortable for me. Right.
Right.
So that's really what we do, I think, as adults with children grieving pets. Is one of the biggest things that I see is parents will ask about, well, should we get another dog? Should we get a dog that looks exactly like the last dog? Should we get another kitten that looks just like the last cat? And I think what happens is it doesn't give kids time to honor their relationship with that pet. It almost minimizes how they felt about that pet and that it was okay to feel that way and that part of life is loss. And it doesn't teach them this beautiful cycle of how life works. And it doesn't teach them about pain and discomfort and sadness. It teaches them that when you lose something, there's a good chance you can go out and get another one. But the trouble is, it's not, gosh, I know how to say this. It's not supporting the bond that child had. And it can cause all kinds of issues down the road, right?
It can turn them into human adult people who don't know how to deal with grief.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so we do this crazy thing, like with replacement in particular, we do this crazy thing where we send kids the message that they shouldn't feel badly. Right. So don't cry. She's okay. She's in a better place.
She's in heaven.
Yep. She loves it there. She's with our other pets. All these things, our heart's in the right place, right? We're trying to support people and kids because we say this to adults as well. So we send this message that people shouldn't be feeling badly. And at the same time, there's this underlying message of, well, it was a loss. Why are you not feeling badly? So for kids, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
Because no wonder they think grownups are nuts.
Right.
It's a really mixed message about when you care about something, how important was that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's making me think about, so my husband and I had our first Rottweiler, his name was Link, and he passed at 6. Within 7 days, we went and adopted another Rottweiler. And I was on board. This was not my husband on his own, but then when he came home, his name was Cash, I was talking to my mom on the phone, and I was crying to her and saying, "It's not his fault. I just want Link."
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
didn't realize that it wasn't the right move, and obviously I wouldn't take it back. Cash was a wonderful dog, but after the fact, I couldn't bond with him.
Mhm.
And my husband, he actually became my husband's dog, even though Rottweiler is my breed, because
Mhm.
it took me it took me years to
Yeah.
make a real relationship with him. And so listening to you talk about replacement, it's like, I know I absolutely did that. And
Mhm.
I can see why and how it happens.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is, so I'm telling you this, right? I teach this in my classes. I talk about this in therapy with clients. I've been in this field a long time, and
Tell
I've
me
got
you did it.
I've got a little 2.5-year-old sitting right here.
Yeah.
Who, we got Nashi. His gang name is Cheese Man. So we got the Cheese Man about 6 months after Nella died, and Nella was 17, and she was my BFF, that kid. I mean, I'd had her since she was 5 weeks old. I knew it was coming. I was just devastated. I still have moments where it just kicks me, it just catches me and I start to cry. It lasts about a minute and a half and then it's gone. So the grief is still there. But I was so much more worried about Finley being lonely that I went and got her a kitten because, of course, that's a great idea. So I
And how does
replaced,
Finley feel about
yeah,
that kitten?
yeah, didn't ask her. I just went and did it, right? Because that's what we do. And I think it was a little different. I felt a little different about it because I bonded with him really quickly because he really needed a home. And I felt like, okay, I'm going to go in. I want a little teeny kitten, 5-week old. And instead we found this 4-month old. And everything in me felt like this was my cat. So I just felt like, okay, it's some sign is coming to me. Maybe it's Nella saying Nashi needs a home and this is what we're going to do. But yeah, it's really hard. It's hard to not do that. It's hard to just sit.
And it feels like 6 months is enough. Like, it feels like you didn't go out the next
Yeah.
day. So
7 days later, like me.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I got Lucy a couple months after Lizzie had passed away, but I remember sitting on the kitchen floor crying and saying, "You're not Lizzie, and it's not your fault, but you're not Lizzie."
Mhm.
And it was hard to bond with Lucy. I mean, clearly we got there because
Yeah.
I love that dog, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was a
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough.
Christy, do you think that that experience has made you, I'm going to put you on the spot here, has made you a little bit more cautious or
Yeah.
more, I don't know what
Gun
the
shy.
word is.
A little gun
Yeah,
shy.
a little
Yeah.
gun shy because Lucy's been gone at this point how long?
She's been gone 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so sorry, friend, but you don't have another dog in the house
No.
and you're struggling right now with decisions about that.
Yeah, yeah. I do think because there were so many characteristics that I loved about Lucy that I need and want in another dog, and that don't occur in rescues on the regular
Mhm.
necessarily. And I'm not looking for a perfect dog, but it's also grief is funny because you forget all the struggles you have in the beginning and you remember the last 5 years together with Lucy was amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like 3 to 5 years. Our bond was amazing. Our relationship was amazing. We had so much fun together. But I forget, she humped my brother to the point he said, "You got to get rid of this dog." Because
Seriously,
we
I
were sharing a
know.
home. He said, "Get training or get rid of the dog."
Yeah.
I forget that she barked pretty aggressively at a Down syndrome girl. Like,
Yeah.
there were some moments that we had that were not just
Mhm.
butterflies and rainbows,
Yeah.
and then it makes it hard to look at other dogs realistically and be like, "I know there will be a point of struggle here, but I don't want the struggle. I just want the good." Like, I just
Yes.
want what I had in the last 5 years,
Mhm.
even
Yeah.
though that takes the process. So, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of gun shy there. Yeah. Yeah, and well, I also don't wanna be stuck in a foster situation where I have a foster for a year and then feel like even though it's not the right fit, I'm just gonna adopt it because nobody
Mhm.
else wants it, and so there's a
I
lot
mean,
of
I could
back and
be
forth
your
for me.
I could be your voice of reason there. for sure. Reminding you of why.
Right.
No.
There is a good voice of reason.
Yeah. I can for sure be that friend for you
Gotta have
again.
one.
Yes. Is this what you really want?
Yeah. Forever. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
Mhm.
pet loss is hard.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think because it's so every day too.
Yeah.
When you lose a person who
Yeah.
you love, but maybe is outside of
Mhm.
your home family,
Yes.
it's those moments where you go, "Oh, I'm gonna call grandma," or "I'm gonna call, Uncle Ted." That gets you and, like, punch you right in the gut. But
Mhm.
it's like you wake up in the morning and you're like, "Oh, I need to feed the dog. Oh, there's nobody to feed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm
It's
gonna put on my walking shoes. Oh, there's nobody to walk."
It's
Mhm.
like a 24/7
Yeah,
reminder,
reminder.
Yeah.
whereas we're not usually living with our parents at that point or Uncle Ted, so it's
Mhm.
not that in your face
Mhm.
constant. Yeah, I was thinking that too about the difference.
Yeah.
Mhm. One thing I wanted to mention back with the kids is there was the sweetest moment when Lucy was passing away. I had the opportunity, I knew for what, like a week and a half, 2 weeks that leading up to it, so people were coming and visiting and different things. I called one of my friends who had lived down the street, and her dog and my dog have been friends for 9 years out of Lucy's 10 years that I had her. And so I said, "Hey, Lucy's gonna pass away. I want you to know in case you wanted to come." And she came with her husband and her daughter, and I was surprised to see her daughter, who's first grade age, kindergarten or first grade. And I said, "Oh, you brought your daughter?" And she goes, "Yeah, we sat down and we told her, we know you love Lucy and Lucy is going to pass away. Do you want to stay with grandma and grandpa, or do you want to come say goodbye to Lucy?"
Hmm.
And she said, "No, I would like to come say goodbye to my friend." And I was like, "Oh, that is like such a sweet to allow them, a child,
Mhm.
to make that decision, but
Mhm.
also to not sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
Hey, she might not feel well. She's not going to be exactly what you remember because
Mhm.
she's not going to be jumping on you and being crazy."
Hugging you.
Yeah, she'd also Lucy would hug the little girl, which she would hump her, and the
Mhm.
little girl said, "I don't like Lucy's hugs. They're not very nice." So we'll always have that memory.
Oh boy.
I think it's sweet that the parents gave her the space to
Mhm.
understand
Yeah.
and make the choice. That feels like an age where she can make that choice. I don't know. Am I right, Jen?
Yeah, oh, I definitely think so. I think we discount all the time kids' ability I mean, kids are better at managing most things than adults are. And I think it's so important for kids to be told within, developmentally, right?
Mhm.
Right.
To be told the truth about what's going on within the limit they can understand, but hiding things from them or sugarcoating, I think, as you said a second ago, Chrissy, the truth, I just is never helpful because kids they'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So whatever you
Yeah.
don't tell them, they'll come up with something that makes sense to them. And they're very creative. And sometimes it's a little scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. It doesn't mean they won't have a narrative. They just
Yeah.
might have a narrative that's even worse, or
Yeah.
that if they had the truth, they could actually learn to process those feelings
Yeah.
and be able to take that moving forward as into an adulthood. Ooh.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have suggestions for things that you can do with kids, Jen, as maybe their pet is passing away or as people are going through this with their kids?
Yeah. Gosh, I would say, on one level, I think parents, particularly when the pet is really theirs, a family pet, of course,
Yeah.
belongs to the kids as well, but it's really the parents who are the
Sure.
primary, caregiver. It's not at all about controlling your grief. I mean, parents often think that they can't grieve in front of kids or cry in front of kids or
Mhm.
let kids see how painful this is for them. All of that is okay as long as it's not overwhelming, as long as the kids don't need to take care of you in your grief.
Mm,
I
Right.
think it's really important that kids see it's okay to be sad, it's okay to cry. Being able to create things like scrapbooks, taking, if kids used to walk the dog with you or the cat, or ferret, whatever your preference is, take your phone with you and snap pictures of things that bring you fun memories? Or do you remember when we did this? Or do you remember when they chased the squirrel up this tree? Wasn't that funny? You know, being able to take pictures of those memories and put them in a little scrapbook. I know for my niece, when they had to put their last, when they had to euthanize their last cat, she just had a little picture that she carried around in her pocket. My sister cut it out and laminated it, and she just carried it in her pocket. She would bring it out and she would show it to people in the store, and she would talk to them about her cat. And, you know, I think
I love that.
isn't that sweet? Any of those kinds of strategies that I think just help kids stay connected and send them the message that it's okay to be as sad as long as you want. And it's okay to sit and talk about the pet and the memories, and it's okay to be scared about when they were sick. It's okay to be scared about them being at the vet. It's okay to be angry. Whatever those things are, I think it's really important to have those conversations and let everything ride, right? There's nothing that should be off limits. Again, though, within their developmental ability, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
One of my favorite lessons, or however you want to say it, after I lost my mom was the concept that grief is not a straight line. There's a meme that's like, you know, what you think grief is, and it's a straight line, and what it actually is, and it's like a squiggly. Yeah, you can't see her, but she's doing the squiggly. We all know that. Seeing that represented just resonated with me so much because I felt like I was all over the place. And so realizing, oh, this isn't something that is just a straight and narrow, and you know, you're just gonna walk your way through it and then you're gonna be done. And I can see how helping kids to understand that as well could be helpful, so that if all of a sudden they get a wave out of nowhere, you know, that hey, it's normal and it's okay, even if it's 3 years from now.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the ways that I talk to people about it, and certainly myself with my own grief over Nella, was I think of it sort of as a spiral. It's kind of a column of messy grief stuff right in the middle. And it's not a downward spiral. I want people going up, right? But if you think about, you know, the loss happens and you're down at the bottom and you start to sort of move sort of on this upward spiral, you are moving forward. It might feel like you're not. It might feel like the grief is always there, and it is. But with every sort of round, every turn that you take, you're moving up a little bit. And so the grief might still be there, but it's different. It looks a little bit different because you're up another rung. And so, yes, it might stay for a very long time. It will shift. It always does. But you know, it's not, we often think that we let go of grief. And I don't believe that we do. I don't think that we end grieving, right? Like we have a loss, we grieve, and all of a sudden one day we wake up and we're like, holy shit, my grief is done. I don't even feel it. Like, it's happening, right? And
Yeah, magical.
That's
back
not
to
a thing.
normal, quote unquote, right?
Mhm.
I don't think that we do that. I think that instead we grieve really hard if we can, if we're lucky, right? And then it starts to sort of ebb and flow a little bit. And so it doesn't actually leave us, we renegotiate.
Yes.
I think that there's always a hole of some kind, and we don't stuff it with things. We renegotiate how do we live around it. So it's sort of like we build a new normal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like you build little bridges so that the hole's there, but you have ways to kind of navigate around it, you know? And sometimes you're like teetering on the edge of a bridge and it's a bad day. And you just kind of have to sit with it. And yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I'll be honest. Last month I was like, oh, I'm over it. I'm good. I'm like, I haven't cried in like 3 weeks. I'm fine. I'm good.
Christy!
And then I was like, oh, I'm not good. I'm not good at all.
Yeah.
Christy, that might be one of the funniest things that you've said on this podcast. Wow.
Yeah. Oh. Are there things that we should avoid doing or saying when trying to support someone who's going through a loss? Because I know you said, I think everything comes from a good heart. We're trying our best, but sometimes things people do and say are really hurtful, even though they mean well.
Mhm.
So are there some things that you would advise avoiding?
Oh my God, how much time do we have?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do I'm working this year on assigning positive intent to the things that people do. So it's my own personal challenge this year. But I think, yeah, even though I say our hearts are in the right place and we mean well, I think that there's always room to be better.
Mm.
So, my intentions were good. That doesn't really land with me. Be better, right? So, yeah, I would say.
God, I love you, Jen.
I know.
I
Listen,
would
bitch, be
say,
better.
yeah, be better. I hear you. Be better. I guess the first one would be don't be an ass. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't.
Solid advice, just
Yeah, don't.
regardless of grief.
1 through 10, don't be an ass. I think that what I talk with people about all the time and what I really try to be conscious of, I mean, we're all people first, right? And then we do these other weird things or kind things after that. But I think I would not recommend being a let's put this into perspective person, meaning what I mean by that is don't make minimizing comments. It's only a cat. It's only a dog. It's just a ferret. It's only a bird.
It could be worse.
Yes, it's not like you lost a child.
Yeah.
So it's this idea of let me help you by putting this loss into perspective, by minimizing how you feel about this loss, right? So I think try to stay away from those things.
That feels real bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yep.
you know what? So when I lost Lizzie, my best friend at the time had lost her daughter at 2 days old and just a few months before. So I didn't even want to tell her because I was like, my loss is so much less. And I remember her saying, no, you need to get off the couch. Like I needed to get off the couch. Let's go to the gym and just have a sad run. And then we'll have sad lunch and nobody has to talk. And it's okay for you to be sad too. And like, oh my gosh, she lost her daughter and she let me be sad about my dog.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I mean, I think we already touched on this. I was thinking about this earlier, but one of the things that I really think people should stay away from is talking to someone who's lost a pet about getting a new one. Sort of the why don't you? And I know, again, it's like we're trying to be supportive. I know that you love cats. Why don't you go and get another one? That, it's the idea of replacement, which can really be detrimental. It can cause a lot of depression and anxiety and guilt and all of this stuff that is not the wonderful experience that we anticipate, right? In pet partnership. And I think really, I would say, and I think this goes for all kinds of grief, don't try to make people feel better. Right? Like you can't heal somebody else's grief. You can't. So don't say things like, give it a few days, give it a few weeks, you'll feel better. I had somebody say to me when Nella died, well, that's why I don't have pets because it just hurts too much or it's too hard. Okay, I hear you, not helpful.
Yeah.
I also had somebody say, well, what did you expect? She was 17. She's really old. I don't care how old she was. I would have given a year off my life probably to give her 20 more, so.
I expected her to live to 100. What?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So those kinds of minimizers, well, they had a nice life. You did everything you could. Like those things are nice comments to say. I think we just have to be really careful not to veer into sort of minimizing territory,
Yeah. And like saying to someone, oh, they were 17. What did you expect? Or, oh, it's a cat. What did you expect? That feels like victim blaming, but grief blaming. I mean, it's almost like putting on them, well, it's your stupid fault because you got a freaking animal, like, ew, no.
Yeah. Actually, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but yeah, that feels right to me.
Feels real blamey. Yeah. And
look at the end of the day, everyone has to go through their grief, right? It's the only way out. You have to go through it. You can't shorten it. You can't heal it for people. You can't make it stop. So allowing them to be and just acknowledging that and just sitting with people is what's actually helpful, not these things that we think we have to say and do.
Honestly, and in some ways, I don't know, maybe this isn't helpful, but so when we knew we were going to lose Lucy, I took my boys over to see her because they were all friends. And when we visited, I didn't really want to talk about how sick she was and everything and that we knew.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to be with Lucy and let them interact like they normally would and sort of just be there, And I don't know if that was good, bad, or indifferent, but it just felt like the right thing because
Yeah.
you knew you were
I
losing
knew what
her.
was happening.
We didn't need to talk about
Right.
that, outside
Although I
of
was trying to get some vet information while you guys were there. I was like,
fair.
"She's doing this now. Can you interpret this as a veterinarian to our
Yeah,
other
because
friend?"
our friend was there who's a vet. No, totally, which you can do whatever you want. But outside of, hey, Tiago, you might not want to jump on her right now. It was like just letting them kind of be. And it was nice in the way, from my perspective, that the dog sort of kept us present. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, I had listened to a podcast maybe like a year ago, and it's a photographer who does end of life dog photography. And she said in her podcast, she said, I never talk about my own experience losing dogs. And I thought, oh, I think she's off on this. I think you should, because it's a way to connect with the person who's losing the dog. And then going through it myself, I've probably fielded 20 different stories about pet loss in that short week and a half. And I was like, oh, this is what she means. And that's not to put anybody on the spot, because I didn't feel like there was only one person that I was like, you're dumping on me. Stop dumping on me. I'm the one who's going through it. Stop dumping all your problems on me. Everyone else was sharing, but I was like, oh, lots of people came over and cried. And so then I didn't feel it was a burden, but I thought, oh, this is where it would be burdensome to try to field so much grief from others while you're doing the grief yourself. And people definitely felt like that was an opportunity to share, oh, when we went through this happened to us. And then they would start crying. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting situation. And I was lucky enough, one of my friends said, hey, I had a dog very similar to Lucy. We did something similar. I want you to know people are going to cry at your house. It's going to be an emotional burden for you. Just prepare yourself for that. And then she's like, I won't do that. And then she cried at my house. She's like, I told you I wouldn't do it. And now I'm doing it. But it was helpful to know that was coming a little bit. But I did enjoy just being in the moment, like with you and the dogs, Heather and Christina, and like just being able to enjoy Lucy just being there, although she wasn't doing much anymore at that last bit, but she was enjoying the boys. Yeah.
I think, and Jen, we had a dog who also, her name was Daisy, was very beloved by a lot of people. And we knew that it was time, and it was some physical things that we were able to pain manage. So we did a living wake the night before we let her go, and just did similar to Christy, but did it in one night. And we had probably 15, 20 people come, and her favorite thing was pizza crust. And so we did beer and pizza. And I agree with you, Christy. There were moments during Daisy's wake that I cried for sure. But all in all, the house was filled with laughter and sharing, because she was such a ridiculous dog. Sharing stories about her just being her, and really feeling community around her. And I think, although to date, her loss has been the hardest one, the way that we went through it and doing that, because it honored who she was, that would not have been the right move for every dog, but for her,
Right.
it was the right move. And the way that we did it, it was good, and it felt good, and it really helped, I think, process, although I don't feel today that I'm processed.
Grief is not a straight line.
It helped process the loss with her community because so
Mm.
many people loved her.
Yeah.
But it was done in one dose
Mhm.
versus over like a week, and for us, it ended up being that way as a requirement because it was yesterday, hey, maybe today, yes, we have no choice. But I agree with you, like sort of having space to laugh and be there
Mhm.
in not a sad way it was helpful to me.
Yeah.
It's almost, in this, in what both of you are saying, it's almost what it feels like for me is this idea of that really is celebrating their lives and who they were and how they lived their life and how they sort of were out in the world and in their communities versus the way that we focus on, I think, more the moment of death, right? The actual moment of loss. That's for most people what sticks in their mind. But I just love this idea of having all of the people who love you and these animals coming over to say, hey, yeah, we are definitely part of this family. I just think that's
Yeah.
lovely. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Hard, but wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I was just thinking about the photos and how, okay, so that night we took photos of Daisy and it was like a celebration of life photo, but I know that the next day that she was gone, right? Ideally, it would have been much more like what Christy did, where Lucy was still well and all of that stuff. But do you find that having all of those memories and sort of doing that in your own space is, I guess, helpful to people? Or is it, oh, well, that's the day that she died? Or is that a really personal, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, Heather. I mean, to me, I'd be curious to see what you both think about that. But I think to me, it feels like it's so personal to you and the animal, right? The type of animal. So
I was just thinking we did an episode with our friend who's a photographer,
Mhm.
and she has conveyed to us that she really struggles with doing the sessions in the last moments, and she's the one who did those photos for me for Daisy. But at this point in her career, she really encourages more like what Christy did when Lucy is still well, but the dog is starting to age. And it's just, I don't know where the fuck I was going with this. Like, I don't know. It
Well,
feels
Yeah.
all over the place.
Is it
No, but
helpful? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes sense to me. And I think that, I mean, yeah, to me, it feels really personal, but
Yeah.
I know for me, I've got some really cute videos of Nella maybe 2 days before we took
Yeah.
her cat, and I can't watch them. It's been 3 years and
Oh,
I can't watch them because I know my mind immediately says, oh, look how little she is. Her fur isn't shiny,
yeah.
So the ones that I feel more connected to and more joy over are the ones where I know she's dying. I know that she's sick, but she's jumping around and we're laughing and the two of them are playing together. Those are the ones that I feel more connected to. The other ones just make me, honestly, what they do is they bring up the memory of then having to go to the vet and the drive there and the drive back with nothing, and
Yeah.
I don't want that, but I want those videos for someday, someday it
Mm.
might be something that I want to think about or see.
So
Have
maybe
the option.
yeah, take the photos and take the videos and then just sort of have them, but see what space you're in and
Yeah.
where you're ready to kind of like deal with them and maybe never.
Yeah.
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 I mean, if you have them and you want them later, they're there.
Yeah.
But that just because you have them doesn't mean you have to cycle through them all the time and think about
Right.
those moments. I think we get
Yeah.
stuck on that versus the actual life,
Mhm.
lifespan, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I am thankful I have photos from 10 years ago of her going for runs on South Mountain when I used to run. All of those memories and
Yeah.
not just the week before or 2 weeks
Mm.
before when she was so skinny and like, ugh. Yeah.
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 But I think I do think it's an individual situation too.
Yeah.
So if you want pictures, get pictures done if you want, but also maybe have some available from when they are well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not be able to look at them. I mean, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Put them somewhere where they're safe and you can leave them there. I mean, it's not a requirement for some people, it helps their grief process. And for other people, it can really keep them stuck. So
Yeah.
Mm.
Heather gave me this great book after Lucy passed.
You've decided it's great now?
No, it's terrible, but it's also great.
I can't wait to hear this.
When the Loss is Deep, and it's a book about pet loss, and it just walks you through that kind of grief process. And she actually says, are there things that you need to put away right now because they're keeping you stuck? Or are there things that you're avoiding because they bring too much pain? Or are you putting them up because they bring you pain and you feel like you need to feel that pain, and kind of walks you through some of those things. And I did think that was interesting. Oh no, this brings me comfort, but that does bring me pain. And I did put that away. It sort of helps you categorize in your mind what you're doing without realizing maybe that you're doing it, and prepares you to be surprised by grief also.
Oh,
Yeah. Like I didn't think like I was flipping through my calendar, and every year I do a calendar of my previous year memories with Lucy. And obviously there's no more memories for this year's calendar, which is I was like, well, duh, of course there's no more memories. Like, of course, that makes sense. But it still caught me off guard because I was like, oh, I need to do my calendar. And then I was like, oh, this is the last year I'll do a calendar of Lucy memories because there's no new memories to make.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, friend. That's hard.
Had to get one good cry in, right?
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
It's hard because my gosh, that's part of the whole, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes, I mean, it's there, but you stumble across it. I got what you said. Like it really resonated with me a couple of minutes ago when you said that, you felt like you were over it, and moving on, you're getting better. And although I raised an eyebrow when you said that,
a professional eyebrow.
A
professional eyebrow went up.
Even my actual eyebrow went up. Because we get surprised, and I think what really, like, you really got me choked up there, because I was thinking about how in so many small ways every day, how those things have the opportunity to come up.
Yeah.
Because pet time is all the time.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes. Yes.
I probably talk to the cats more than I talk to Trent.
Yeah.
And,
they're probably better listeners.
Yeah, but it's just, it's really hard. It's hard when those things pop up unexpected.
Yeah. And I feel like with Lucy, after she passed, I was like, oh, I think I'm done with photography. I think I'm done. She was my muse. I'm done. And my camera broke. So that was like oh, well, the camera's broken, the dog's gone. So this is a good time to just cut my losses. But going back through, I told our photographer friend, I said, going back through, I realized I have all these really comforting memories. And I want to give that to myself in the future with a future pet. But I also want to be able to provide that for other people in the future too, so that they have those memories. So it's, it goes from extremes. Like, I'm never picking up another camera again. And then you're like, oh, you know what? Actually, I could do this again and it would be okay.
And there's space for all of it.
Yeah.
But I would be really sad if you didn't pick up a camera again, just because you have gifted me with some of the most precious memories that I have of my dogs. And that is such a gift that you've given, not just to yourself with your photos of Lucy, but to others. And I personally would say, hey, whenever you're ready, if that's 16 years from now, then that's when you're ready. But I do think that there is a real beautiful legacy in there that wraps up with Lucy.
And I don't do cat photos yet, Jen, but I think when I get a new camera, I think Nash and Nella, or
oh
not
my
Nella,
God,
I'm so sorry. Nash and Finn need to be
I mean, Nash is very handsome.
Yeah.
And he knows he's very handsome. So yeah, he would love to sit for photos.
Oh God. I
Love it.
kind of like want to be there. I
Come
want to watch
on
that.
over.
I want to watch that happen. Oh my God. That's so funny.
We're having a party at Jen's house.
Yeah. I just invited myself, which is pretty typical for my personality. So there you go.
The more the merrier.
And truth be told, I tried to convince Jen's husband Trent while Jen was out of town to do a photo session with the cats, like in a full tux with the cats, and then like
Stop.
hang a huge photo. Like so when she came home, it was just
Stop.
there. But he felt like it was more making fun of himself than
Was he
pulling a
wrong?
prank on Jen.
Okay.
And I was like, I mean, come on. If she walked in and there was like a full like
That
full
is
body size
hysterical.
like, picture of you, he would
Christy,
not.
just one of the reasons I love you.
He would not play along,
That-
Jen.
That is freaking hysterical. Oh my God.
Man.
So now we'll have to do Jen in a full formal gown when Trent's out of town.
With the
Yes,
cats.
and could we do those? Can you do those photos where the cats are sort of up here and we're all looking to the side?
Yes,
You know, like those
absolutely.
old Olin Mills photos?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. God, that'd be
I'll
amazing.
figure out how to do that.
Owen
Okay.
Mills, circa 1982.
Yep.
So funny. Oh, we got a little
So
off
nice
track.
thing to know, yes, is grief can live with other emotions too.
Yes.
So you can have laughter and
Mhm.
joke and also have grief at the same
Yeah.
time. Like
With a
that
little
is
sarcasm sprinkled
of
in.
course,
Yep.
some snarky sarcasm. Yeah.
It's such a good
Um,
point.
Do you feel like there's specific things? We kind of hit on this when we were doing things that are not helpful, but things that are helpful for people who are grieving.
Ooh, yes. I would honestly, the first thing that came to mind when you started that question was the phrase lean in.
Oh, yeah.
You have to you have to lean in and you just have to know it's going to hurt. And I really think, the things that are best in life are not the things that come easy, and so these relationships are I just think they're beautiful and they're so deeply important that of course they're going to hurt and that's one way to honor that, right? So I would say lean in. And I think know that your grief is going to be different. It's different for everyone. And it also depends on the loss and how the loss happened, right? So some people show up in their grief as being really angry, fearful, depressed, anxious, overwhelmed. Sometimes, I was talking to a woman a couple of months ago who was really feeling a lot of guilt, which is very common, but guilt also over feeling relieved.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's so much
Yeah.
care that goes into particularly an older animal or an animal with a lot of medical needs or an animal who's been in an accident of some kind. And then there's prolonged care, right? And it can be really disruptive. And that doesn't mean you don't love them. It means that it's disruptive and life is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so being okay with all of those emotions, I think is really important. And really, I think being honest about your guilt. Guilt is one that people talk a lot about with grief and loss. And I think guilt with pets seems to come most often because we take full responsibility for their lives. And then we somehow think that we should or are responsible for taking full responsibility for their death. Right? It's part of life. And whatever you believe, I would get counseling. If you believe in animal communication, I know Christy and I have had some conversations about that where I've shared my thoughts on that. If you believe in animal communicators or those kinds of conversations, please talk to somebody. Don't let other people tell you that the way that you're grieving or the way that you want to move through your grief is not okay. Let them do theirs. You do yours. I guess the only other thing that I would say off the top of my head is that there's no timeline, right? It can take a really long time.
Yeah.
And that there are lots of strategies that people can use, of course, self-care strategies, but it's going to take a lot of time and that's okay. And you really just can't let other people tell you how to do this thing because it's hard and it could be hard for a long time,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple things that were helpful for me from other people was a lot of people brought me food. And I was like, oh, that's one less thing I have to think about right now, which was really great because I was literally door dashing chicken nuggets because it was the only thing Lucy would eat. So if people were bringing me food, I could say, would you mind just getting some chicken nuggets or some French fries with whatever you're getting? And people were like so happy to be a part of that. Like, yes, of course, I want to help. Things that weren't helpful were like, well, what can I do for you? But instead, when people would say, can I do this for you? That was helpful. And I just did that. I just went through it. And then my friend lost her dog and I said, what can I do for you? And I was like, Christy, like she can tell you like, oh, could you please do X, Y, and Z for me? No. And so then like a couple days later, I was like, can I bring you a meal today? Are you free for lunch? Would you like to stay inside or would you like to go out for this? Would it be convenient for me to bring it to you or would you like me to pick you up and meet you somewhere? Yeah. And so giving some of those options was helpful as well. Like, oh yeah, no, I would like to be out of my house or I don't ever want to leave my house. So just come into the depression cave.
Instead of asking an essay question, give multiple choice.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And I think understanding that re-engaging in your life is deeply important. It's not disrespecting your loss or your grief or your pet or, I think we get into these phases of, well, I should be sad. It shows how deeply my relationship was. But, if you think about it, the way that I sort of think about it is, what would your pet want for you? Is this really what they would want for you? Home, alone? I mean, I know that's part of grief, right? But they would want you to engage. That's one of the reasons that they loved us, was the way that we engage, right? And so doing what you can do to feel like you're a part of your life again, I think is really important. And I think watching the guilt and honestly, if people feel really overwhelmed, and I know grief stays a long time, but if it really stays and it really hangs in there and you cannot get to even a slightly better place, it's really important to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And there's maybe other things going on too.
Yeah. And like Jen pointed out, she's doing a grief group, but when the guy who euthanized Lucy came, he gave me material on grief groups offered in my area, as well as professional counseling offered in my area, which I thought was,
I thought that was so nice.
Yeah. I don't have to go and look for that. And I didn't end up needing it yet, but I just thought, oh, that's so nice to have it handy if you need that, Yeah.
I wanted to touch on sort of the guilt and the difficult emotions that can come with grief. So just because it can be the total mixed bag, we had a dog that had behavioral issues and she had to be separated from the rest of our dogs. We lived 10 years in a crate and rotate situation because of her. And when she passed, I grieved her. She was my first sport dog. She was there was a lot of stuff there, right? And I almost got divorced over keeping her and when we started to have issues. And so I had a lot of grief over all of that, but I did also feel so much intense relief because for the first time in 11 years, there was peace in our home. And we didn't live with the worry of a dog fight. And it was so much just relief. And sitting with all of those emotions, it was such a bittersweet thing. I am lucky that I had some people who had prepared me for how that would feel. And so I had a little sort of, window into what was coming, and I was prepared to as much as you can be, but it was a really, really intense mixed bag of emotions, and I had to hold space for all of it. And so I just wanted to say and kind of touch back on that talking with pets, and when it is a dog that has behavioral issues or who has a dog that has really made life maybe a little bit look different than what you expected, it can really be an intense period of grief or intense, thing for people to go to. And all of what you feel is okay, every bit of it. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that from a behavioral standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, Heather. I think that's such an important thing to just remind people that all of this entire process is messy. Nobody gets out of this unscathed. Nobody walks the straight line of grief, right? Because there isn't one. And so in any relationship, there are periods where we feel frustrated and relieved and guilty and sad. You know, this is a relationship. And so of course all of those things come. And one thing that I was thinking as you were talking was that part of what I think we also have to do, I think the guilt and the relief come because sometimes we think, well, we could have lived differently. We could have done something different. We should have made a different decision. And rather than focusing on that, because it's done, right? It's more for me, maybe thinking about reframing it and talking about it to yourself as, what are the things that I did do?
Oh, I love that.
Right? What were the moments where we did show care and the dogs were happier, the cats were happier? There are always those moments, but our brains immediately go to the negative because we get stuck in guilt. Guilt is insidious. I mean, guilt just creeps into every crevice and it hangs on tight, right? And I think what we need to do is we've got to be able to be honest with ourselves about the care that we did provide and the love and the support and the fun and the laughs. And yeah, there were some really hard moments, and there are these other moments too. You know?
I love that. I love that because Lucy, she was named Lucy too, because Lucy was happier by herself. So I completely agree with you. I love reframing that and saying, even, you know, yes, it was difficult, but look at all of the things that were successful and all of the love and care that we gave to this pet during that time. I love that.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people who are grieving a pet loss when they encounter someone, like we talked about earlier, someone who doesn't understand their loss, which is
I think
a large part of
yeah, like how do you keep yourself safe in that moment or as best as possible?
Yeah. So when we started, we were talking about this idea of it not being an acceptable loss, acceptable, right? In quotes, for a lot of people out there in the world. And so I think part of it is really keeping yourself safe. So know who your people are, right? Know your people, know your group. There are people who you know will show up in the ways that you need them to. And then there are people who, I know we all know these people who will try to show up, but they're going to show up in ways that I'm going to walk away and I'm going to be hurt or angry or pissed or whatever it might be. I wouldn't share so much with those people. I don't know that I would want to be with them in my grief, right? So I'm going to interact with them in different ways, or maybe I'm going to take a break on interacting with them because I know going into that relationship that this is going to be challenging, right? I think it's important though to also set boundaries or I guess maybe I would say expectations. And I think that those are helpful depending on the person, right? So knowing their limitations. So for example, I have said to people things like, I know I'm going to sound like a therapist when I say this, but I've said to people some version of, you know, it's really hurtful to me when you say she's just a cat. She was so much more to me and she was a major part of my life and I loved her and I need you to understand that. So it's more giving them the message of it's really hurtful or it really frustrates me when you make these kinds of comments. It's not helpful to me when you say this thing. And sometimes it's family. Sometimes, you know, it's the people who we love the most, who we need the most from, who are the people who say things like, well, you know what? It's just a cat. She was just a cat. She was old. You had her for a long time. Move along. So being able to say, you know, I'm in a really tough place right now. I'm really raw. I'm really sad, whatever your language is. And then being able to say, I would really appreciate you not saying things like that. Or helping people understand what you do need from them. Sometimes to get people to stop saying those things, you can just ask them to sit quietly with you. Please don't say anything.
Could you shut your stupid mouth and just sit down?
Everyone shut the hell up. Yeah. So, I mean,
I'm going to be like, in the words of Dr. Jen, can you shut your stupid mouth? Thank you.
Everyone shut your stupid mouth. it's okay to say to people, I'm sure you're not aware how hurtful that comment was. I'm sure you didn't mean to say she's just a cat, because you know how important she was to me. So even if you want to take a more down low approach to saying, please don't say things like that, all of those kinds of things are okay. So I think setting boundaries, setting your expectations. I have a wonderful friend in my life who is a super empathetic, kind person, super easy crier, big pet lover. And I had to say to her when we went to lunch one day after Nella died, I can't talk about it. Please don't ask me. I don't want to say anything. I know that you love me and I know that you're here for me. I don't want to talk about it, because as soon as I say something, she's going to cry, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
Because I can't
That makes
manage her emotions. Right.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things are okay to do. And I think getting counseling, listen, it's okay to go to counseling to talk about your pet.
100%. 100%.
Talk to somebody.
Everybody go to therapy, just everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I have a journal. This is going to sound so weird. I actually probably shouldn't even say this. I have a journal
I'm excited
that I kept before. I mean, we knew Nella was dying, right? And so, and she wasn't my first cat to die. And so I knew that the first time was really hard, and I talked to her all the time. So I don't act like she's not around. She's in my head, right? She's here in my own belief system, right? And so I talk with her all the time. And Trent's always like, what are you laughing about? I'm like, just talking to Nella. Nella just said something funny. But I also journal, and I used to write now about the last moments and the things that were hard and the things that I wish she were here for now, how things are going with the new guy. So it's just write about your thoughts, write about your feelings, create a scrapbook if that's important to you. If it makes you happy, look at it. If it doesn't, make it and put it away for later. Do things that your pet would have liked. I mean, it's easier for dog owners, right? Because you're out in the world.
Sure.
Go places, do things that your pet would have liked. Take some pictures of you doing them, put those in the scrapbook. My God, what really helped me was volunteering. And there were times, I will say, where I was in the kitten room and I was being mauled by a bunch of kittens and I got a little choked up. But it really felt good to give back, to take care of a cat that wasn't mine. So I think those kinds of self-care things are just so important,
Yeah, that's interesting that you said volunteering really helped, because I thought after Lucy, going back to the shelter we would do enrichment, and I hadn't been able to go for a while, and I went back after Lucy had passed, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so hard. But it just brought so much joy to my heart to be there again and volunteering and giving back again. It was like, oh yeah, it's good to give back. It's good to be out of myself,
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the morning after my Lucy passed that I did a walk at the shelter, and everyone was like, I can't believe you're here. But for me, I agree. It felt like the right thing to do because we did adopt her. And I had the first agility qualifying run ribbon that we had earned together. I had looped on my belt loop. And I had that, and I was wearing that during the walk and showing people and being like, oh, and that was my little way of taking her with. So I think, it's whatever works for you that feels healthy too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like what you said, Jen, about knowing your people, even if those aren't your family. My family has a weird sense of humor, and we joke about death a lot, like an absurd amount. And sometimes it makes other people uncomfortable because we seem so comfortable with death. However, once a death has occurred, no one in my family talks about it. So it's okay to joke about it beforehand, but once it happens, nobody talks about it. So then I remember going to dinner with my family, and I was like, oh, I can't talk about Lucy because we don't talk about death. Like after the fact. And I don't think anyone in my family means for that to be the case or wants that to be the case. It just is how it is.
It's
so then,
the dynamic.
I have this great group of friends who are like, tell me about Lucy. Tell me how you're feeling today. Tell me, you can be sad or you can be happy or whatever.
Yeah. And I think people who will let you be who you need to be in that moment. Like I remember when Trent and I came to your house with Nash's plant, and I mean, I know you, and we laugh about a lot of things and we joke about a lot of things. And that's really kind of this space that I felt like you were in, like you weren't in a place where we were all going to sit and have a good cry, right? That's not where
Right.
we were at.
Yeah.
And it was really important, I think, for me to just sort of figure out where you're at and let you be in that place because that's your grief process. It doesn't involve me, right? Other than, hopefully on the outside providing support. But I think it's really important that, yeah, when we say know your people, you got to sort of let people know what you need too.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have moments that are funny and sarcastic and not grief laden, right?
I do agree. Knowing your people doesn't mean it's necessarily your family because my people are not my family. So I looked to a particular person when I lost my mom, wanting that person to bring her closer to me. And I'll just say, because he'll never listen, it was my dad. And that was a very unsuccessful strategy for me. And it took a really long time for me to recognize that pattern and recognize that that was a real bad way to go. So I think also, like you said about knowing your people, and if you think someone is a right person in that moment, but you come away not quite feeling good about an interaction, sit with that. Don't just say, well, I really thought that was my person. Let me go back again. Just kind of sit with it and do a little analysis. And if you determine, well, I thought that's what I needed, but it's not quite right, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to say that. Yeah.
Lastly, do you have resources for people that you would recommend for people going through grief? Obviously, like you said, get counseling if that grief is not moving forward, if you're not spiraling up. But were there other resources that you would recommend?
There are, and you noted this earlier, Christy, too, but there are some really cool online free grief groups, and they're on Zoom. And I actually, before I started my group at the shelter, I attended some online to see kind of what they were like and if those were things that I would recommend. And I loved it. I thought it was so helpful. Even after all of this time in my own grief, I got some new insights and some new thoughts. So that's certainly an option. And honestly, there are so many. You could just Google online Zoom grief groups, and they're really wonderful. There is a grief podcast called the Pet Loss Companion. And it's run by two therapists, and they have a ton of episodes. I've listened to a bunch of these, and it really is they have these really neat conversations. So I think that that's a really good resource just to sort of listen and get an idea of the grief process and what happens. And if you have questions about a certain topic, I'm sure that they have a podcast on it. So
I love that. We will link that in the show notes for sure.
I said earlier, of course, I think everybody could benefit from being in counseling all the time. So I think counseling is a really good option, even if you don't feel, please don't be someone who says, well, I'm not grieving that much, or I'm not that overwhelmed or depressed or anxious or whatever it might be. Counseling can give you just such a different healthy perspective on how you grieve. It can support you in your process. So it's not like you have to be absolutely at the bottom of the barrel to go to counseling. A really good website is psychologytoday.com. You can search your insurance, you can search types of therapists, therapist specialties. So it's a really comprehensive website. I recommend that to a lot of people. Depending on what you believe, there are also animal communicators out there. And that's a process that might help people to go through. So I think there are a lot of resources out there in the world. It's just knowing what you need and giving it a try.
Yeah.
Psychology Today is how I found the last two therapists. So I agree. It's a great resource. Yep. And sometimes it can be difficult when you're struggling to parse out go through that process and figure everything out. So something that I would do is I would make a list of people on First Pass who looked like they were a match for me. And then I would make a list, and then I would go to their website as I felt like I was capable and sort of look and be like, does this seem like somebody I feel like I would be a match for? And then cut down my list to try to find somebody that I felt like was going to be a good personality match for me. And that was really helpful. And I just wanted to add that if you go to a therapist or a counselor and you don't feel like they're your fit, don't keep going, find someone else.
Right.
Because if you are going and the person is not the right match for you, you're probably not going to get what you need. And it can be a waste of everyone's time. And what you really need in that time is the right resources. So if you go and they're not a match, move on.
And yeah, I just really want to highlight that, Heather. I think that's such an important point. And I'm saying this as a therapist myself. Interview people.
Yep.
Interview your therapist. Just because you've chosen them and they've said, yes, I have this opening at this day and time, doesn't mean that they have to be your person now for the next year and a half. Interview them, spend the first time, the first session talking with them about their beliefs on pets. How do they feel about pet loss? Do they have pets? To just get a sense of who they are and how they operate, and if they're going to be able to help you sort of take care of the things that you need to take care of. Just because it's not a good fit doesn't mean you're saying something negative about them.
Right.
It's really important to interview people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in this world that just aren't bad people. They just don't have personalities I get along with. And guess what? Therapists are people, so that's okay.
Yep.
I am a part of a grief loss support group for dogs who people have lost due to behavioral issues. And I went in there and was looking around for people who have done different things in honor of their pets. And if anyone's looking, the group is Losing Lulu, LULU. It's on Facebook. It's a very supportive place, but very specific. And some of the things that people had mentioned on there, 3 books specifically for children, which is The Rainbow Bridge by Adrienne Rayside, Dog Heaven by Cynthia Rylant, which, if that's applicable to your belief system, The Invisible Leash by Patrice Karst. Hopefully I'm saying those names right. So those were 3 books that I saw for children that kept coming up over and over again. So I thought, okay, these must be really good resources for people. Some of the other things that I thought were really neat, obviously we already touched on the photography. If you or your child have a certain photo that's just really close to you. Maybe I love the idea of, was it your niece carrying it around laminated in her pocket? That's adorable. I kind of want to do that for myself, but I do really love that, or frame it on the wall, whatever space you're in that feels good. Someone else, for their dog, they took their dish and they put the collar around it, and then they made like a little planter, which I just thought was really sweet, in a way, sort of like there's new life there in a really positive way. So I just thought that was idea was something I'd never thought of and thought was really, really neat. So those were some of the things that I had kind of come across.
Yeah, those are nice. I like those.
And
Yeah.
I will say, coming from, I think you both know, well, Jen definitely knows, but I think you both know that my upbringing is very Christian, very in the church. And most Christians don't believe in pets after life. I will tell you, once a Christian has a forever dog, their soul pup, every single one of them suddenly believe in the Rainbow Bridge. Like the staunchest Christians will be like, and I think, your dog is now playing with my old dog, and they'll see you on the other side of the Rainbow Bridge. So it does make me laugh when I think about that, because I absolutely think my dogs will be on the other side of this life waiting for me. So your beliefs may also go through some changes as you go through this grief process.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
we'll also, let's link that book that Heather gave me as well.
Oh yeah, I'll link
as a
that
great
one.
resource. Yeah.
There's also a book. It's a very old one now, but they might have a new edition out. My mom bought it for me years and years ago when one of my cats died, but it's called Animals in the Afterlife. So if you're someone who's on maybe the other side in thinking about pet communication or where pets are in the afterlife, that's just an interest. It's a big book, but it's just a sort of an interesting, I found it very calming. I wasn't sure at that point what I believed in, but I really thought some of the information was just lovely and very supportive.
Yeah.
Lots of books out there,
Yeah.
lots and lots of resources.
And I would also say if you find a resource and some of it is great for you, take what serves you and leave the rest. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed Jen was telling me about one of her grief counseling groups that she went to and said she got this nugget of what did your pet teach you? Each pet is here to teach us a lesson. And I sat down with that and like journaled out what I thought, like what I felt Lucy taught me, but also what I felt even Julius had brought me and taught me. And like it was helpful to think through some of those things, like that little
I love
nugget.
that you
So
did
take
that.
those nuggets. Yeah.
That's cool.
I love that. I feel like we survived.
We survived it with some laughs in there.
We did it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think people need to feel comfortable sitting in their process.
Mhm.
And the more we talk about it, the more normalized that becomes.
Yeah.
Jen, we just want to thank you so much for being here and spending your time with us and giving us such amazing resources on such a tough topic. So thank you again for being here and spending your day with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You know, I do hope that people hear that while there are certainly serious and painful moments, there's also a lot of levity and laughter and just sort of joy in the loss process too. So
Yes.
yeah, this was great. Thanks,
Mm.
guys.
If you've enjoyed this episode, subscribe, rate, and share us wherever you get your podcasts. Also, come on over to Instagram and engage with us at Sometimes There's Side Eye.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.